Oh, shine on me. All right.
All right, man.
Time for another episode of the Digital Marketing Answers Show. And here you go. Here's the title of our show. All right.
Peace, love, and SEO.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. Awesome. So yes, we're going to dig into the history of SEO today. Thrilled as always to have my co-host Mark Traphagen here with me, and then a true legitimate SEO relic, Ammon Johns. Thank you for joining us, Ammon.
Pleasure.
And I love the hat. I think it's a good classic hat. As Mark said in the green room, that qualifies you to be part of the security crew for a Grateful Dead concert. So should be a great discussion. And by the way, I'm avoiding the fact that I could rightfully be called a relic as well in all this. We won't get into all of that, okay? But I've really been looking forward to the show. It should be great fun. And so the first question for you is, for the audience, is who can tell us the original nickname for Ammon Johns? So that's an easy one if you've been around the industry for a while. And I won't
there is a slight clue.
Yeah, well, well, I was going to hold off on the clue, but we'll see how quickly someone comes up. So major brownie points for the first one to put it out there.
And by the way, it needs to be the G-rated ones, none of the other ones that you all know.
Yeah, the nice things people called me.
Oh, right. Well, okay, that shortened the list dramatically.
Yeah.
But you know, let's dive in. We can drive in too, but I think we kind of should start with, why do we care about the history of SEO? I mean, first of all, it might be kind of interesting to get all that, but what do you think? What's the reason why this is a discussion that today's modern marketers should care about?
Because things are always changing. You need to know that just as we've got 20 years in, you can still expect 20 years of change ahead. And the guys who figured this all out have got methods and skills in determining what's going on, in being able to look at a set of results, place experiments, work things out. And I often say, the guys who started this, the pioneers, I would still bet on them if they had to start from scratch today with $5 and a bit of internet access. I would still bet on them to get there.
Yeah, totally. I do think that's part of it. I also think that by studying the history of SEO and the things that people have done over the years, you can learn a lot about human nature and marketing in general, right? And I think these are lessons that are very valuable to carry forward and learn from. But I totally agree with the part about just being adaptable and understanding the need to adapt, and getting in the business of seeing what the tea leaves are telling you about where it's going, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the things when you're trying to shoot at a moving target, the biggest clue isn't where it is, it's looking at the trajectory. It's looking at how fast it was traveling, where it's been, because that's how you predict where it's going.
I think that that relates to how, in the way that we are kind of we like to stylize ourselves sometimes in SEO as being scientists, in that we examine data. Hopefully, we're doing it at its best in a scientific manner. And by the way, it might be you, Ammon, somebody has notification sounds coming through, and if it's a phone turned on or on the desktop, keep hearing them. But anyway, I think of it in terms of like physicists that are looking at things like dark energy that's out there. That's something that we can't yet see. We can't like put it in our hands or even measure it. What we can do is measure the effects of it. We know something must be there because the universe keeps expanding at at an accelerating rate, which it shouldn't be doing. So in the same way, with SEO, what we do is we are looking at what the search engines are doing. They tell us only a very limited amount, and we have to back engineer it. We have to look at the results and test things and see what they do. And part of that is understanding that that trajectory, as you said. It's measuring the effect, and we can guess some in a more educated manner where they're going by knowing where they've been.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And by the way, we do have a winner. Hey, Kim, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm glad you're here watching with her. But yes, the Black Knight.
She's cheating. She was there.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, but that's all right. Drysdale was just a little bit behind, but great job, Kristen. Great to have you here as well. Lots of other people. We've got John Rampton here. Hi, John. How you doing? I never get over your facial expression in this picture, by the way. And then Christopher.
That's John expressing the entire history of search in one facial expression.
There you go. And then Christopher Vogelman reminds us of your other label here that we're fond of using with you, Ammon. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much to be learned by seeing where things have come, and as you said, the trajectory is really important. And if we take our way all the way back to the start of things, well, it depends on how starty you want to go. But I mean, there was a point in time where Alta Vista was the dominant search engine, and let's talk about Alta Vista a little bit, and then we'll kind of work our way forward from there.
Absolutely, and I've met people who think, oh, well, it doesn't matter what happened with Alta Vista. Yes, it does, because by the time Alta Vista was already fading, most of its employees had gone to work for Google. So there's a lot of old Googlers, core Googlers, that came from Alta Vista. There was a famous patent that was granted, I think it was granted in 2003. It had 4 names on the patent. By the time it was granted, all 4 worked at Google.
That's
Alta Vista patent, yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right. I mean, just talking about Alta Vista, I think there's one lesson you can draw right away, which is if there's going to be something that ever supplants Google, somebody has to do to Google what Google did to Alta Vista, right? I mean, Alta Vista was dependent on content analysis, text analysis, and it was easily gamed. This is where we got people putting white text on white backgrounds, or using CSS to move text to off screen, off to the far right, or something like that, so it wasn't visible. Loading keywords in keywords meta tag, and all these kinds of things. And essentially what Google did to them is that they came up with a fundamentally better algorithm. And so you had a situation where somebody was market leader, and then suddenly, in a very short period of time, they became an afterthought.
Well, let me ask this. What would you guys say is the chief difference that Google brought to the game between Google and Alta Vista and the other early search engines that were out there? What really was their game changer that put them out ahead of everybody else?
This is your softball question? Is that what that is there, Mark? Yeah, to me, they separated the concept of relevance from importance, right? So relevance is kind of what a page is about, and importance is now being measured separately through links. That's my short summary as to what I think Google did. I mean, Ammon, what do you think?
I think that's part of it. There were 3 things that came all at once. The first was that Alta Vista got spammed to death, and absolutely, it was so full of spam that the search results were very poor, and people were looking for an alternative. The second one is presentation. At that time, nobody had monetized search. Monetizing search is relatively new, and to this day, there's only one search engine that's actually making a proper profit, and that's Google. Bing is a loss leader, and significant one. So what they were doing at that time is that all of the search engines were becoming portals, and they had email tied in and games tied in and news tied in, and it was just such a messy kind of business. Search was almost the least thing on the page, even though Alta Vista was quite good at it apart from the spam, and people continued to use Babelfish for translation years later, even in preference to Google's first attempts. But that was a second thing, you know, Google's interface so clean, just a search box. We just do search, we're focused. That's what it said. And everyone commented on that minimalist design. It really was significant to people. And the third thing was, yeah, the results were very good. We got the chance to see it first through Yahoo using it, which meant that Yahoo ended up owning 10% of Google, and Yahoo are probably still in business mostly through those shares in Google. We got to see it that way. It introduced people to the results, and people spread through word of mouth, oh, there is a better engine, try Google. And Ask Jeeves was right up there with it in this country for a long time. In 2001, the two engines were almost neck and neck. But Ask Jeeves made a fatal mistake. They tried to monetize a different way. They tried to monetize submissions, so businesses could get indexed better if they paid, which meant that they'd given themselves an incentive to not index. Mm-hmm. If they're indexing, they're robbing their own pockets. So, you know, this slowed down their growth. Google had much, much bigger database. The only company that was keeping pace with them was Fast, if you remember them, F-A-S-T.
Yeah.
And, you know, those things all came together. It was a combination. Word of mouth won it, but it was that simplicity, the fact that we needed an alternative because the old ones had been spammed to death, and the fact that, you know, the results were good enough and people were talking about it a lot.
I remember, you know, back in those days, one factor, you talk about the simplicity of the user experience, there's that shocking white screen with just the search window in it, the audacity of the I feel lucky button. But the other thing was, you know, having read in the Plex and some history of Google, their determination early on to dominate by data, just to have more data than anybody else not only had, but could even catch up with having. And I remember one of the first things, I remember this distinctly, being so impressed, was putting in that search result and seeing, you know, 10,567,432 results, you know, from a search result. It's just like, that was so audacious. You're never going to look past that first page or two, but just knowing there were over 10 million results for this query was so impressive.
Yeah, no, it was very cool. So there's three things you guys said that I want to sort of call out here. First of all, Ammon, you're right. The commercial side of things, the AdWords model, where the concept of quality score and making a bid and your click-through rate times your price determining your ranking, which, by the way, if you haven't thought through the math, actually maximizes Google's revenue per 1,000 page views. It's brilliant math that does that. I'll get to your question in a minute, the one that you're highlighting here, Ammon. So I think that was a revolutionary model, and the fact that nobody else has ever succeeded in making an ongoing sustainable profit on it is kind of a big deal. Then you mentioned the notion of the minimalist search box. Both of you guys mentioned it, and I think we need to understand that this was the forerunner of this whole concept, which launched companies like Twitter and Snapchat, right? It was the first thing that came out on the internet and very clearly said, less is more. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting, and you can really think of it as that. It kind of might have even been the inspiration for some of those other businesses, right? And then lastly, the whole thing about data. We think of Google as a search company. You could argue that they are a data company, and that's really what they are more than anything else.
I usually point out, of course, their technology, not even the data, but they were pioneers in cluster networking. Mm-hmm. They had the ability to scale up in ways nobody else could. Many Googlers have gone on to be champions of cluster networking technology around the world. The state of the art has come from Google as much as anybody, and it's immense.
Yeah. And one of the funny things about that state of the art too is that I don't know what they do today, but I know there was a point in time where they deliberately populated their data centers with very cheap, not even, I don't want to say poor quality, really motherboards of computers that they put into racks, but it's not necessarily poor quality, but they weren't paying premium prices because they had such a great technology for failover protection that it was more cost effective for them to build racks of these cheap servers, and then they had the technology to make all those things work really, really well.
Yeah, it was just brilliant. They said they were told that you can only have so many servers per rack per square foot, of a server space because of all the cooling requirements and how finicky they were like that. And they just said, just go out and buy the cheapest. They bought used stuff. They bought anything they could find on the market, and just built in, multiple redundancies, so that they could scale up, as you said, build that database so fast and not worry. But the stuff failed like 10 times faster than anybody else, but they didn't care. They just threw it away, put more in.
Yeah, they used to say that, as they were scaling up, and sometimes they were putting up 1,000 new boards on the racks a day.
Yeah.
There were 100 or more dead ones that they weren't even bothering to replace until it got to a point where they just go ahead and clear the lot out.
Yes, indeed. So you fired up a question there a little earlier, Ammon. You want to bring that back?
It was a comment from Bill here, and he's mentioning an Alta Vista patent with 3 future Googlers who we'll recognise the names of: Jeff Dean, Monica Hetzinger, and Krishna Bharat. Now, those are 3 pivotal people at Google, and yeah, all 3 from Alta Vista. So it's just highlighting that point. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so this is. It's an incredible environment. I mean, the big data. We didn't. No, we already did talk about that. I mean, there's so many things that they really launched. Okay, so yeah, I saw that there, Mark. I was actually not rushing to share that one, but there you go.
It does sound like the branding for Hooters, doesn't it?
There you go. Yeah, it's amazing how many things they pioneered at that stage in time, all starting from 2 kids out of Stanford University, working their way into a garage in Palo Alto.
I think it's worth pointing out that we did mention the finance side of things a little earlier, but it's worth really mentioning, Google didn't start off with that model. That was their 4th or 5th attempt to monetize. They didn't come up with it until 2002, 2003. And they copied it from somebody else who'd made it work, GoTo, who became Overture. Google's original model, well, let's face it, we all know that their original thing was to sell the algorithm to Yahoo, and Yahoo turned them down, Excite turned them down. Boy, those guys have never lived down the fact that they turned down the technology of Google for $1 million. They turned it down, and look at what it's worth today.
And of course, when Yahoo turned it down, Marissa Mayer was working there at Google.
Yeah.
Now she's CEO of Yahoo. So.
And then after they launched, they did Google in a Box, which was basically Google's technology in a server that you could have in your intranet. They licensed Google search technology, and that didn't work either. And it was only in 2003 when AdWords really took off. And again, it was just a small innovation, but it was such a clever one. Overture, it was a pure bid marketplace. Whoever bid the most was top. Google was just that little bit different again. What they did was they looked at click-through data. And if you had a really popular ad that people liked, even if it paid less, it would get promoted. And you'd have to pay more and more if you had an unpopular ad to take that top space. It was kind of like a tax on the unpopular.
Yeah, no, it really put a high pressure to be highly relevant. But as I said before, it also maximized their CPM on their pages. So it improved the quality of the product while improving their revenue at the same time.
Yeah.
What could be better than that?
Whoever developed it, we know this is true of this a lot of things at Google, that they didn't necessarily develop them in-house, but they were smart enough to realize somebody's doing it right, and we've got enough cash, so we'll buy it and bring it in. With AdWords is having those ads right alongside search that are highly relevant to what the person is searching for at the moment. That was just mind-blowing. And now you see other networks like Facebook trying to figure out how to do the same thing within a social network. But that's, everybody realizes now that's where the value is that you get people, you know, that want to see an ad because it's speaking directly to what their intention is at the moment.
And of course, taking it that step further, syndicating it through AdSense, where anyone could put a space for the ads, and Google would work out what ads should go there and test them. And you know, we sometimes used to joke about it. It used to be called webmaster welfare on Webmaster World in the day. You know, if you didn't if you didn't want to actually work at getting a good affiliate income, you could just stick AdWords in there, and it would, you know, keep you going.
I hope Marissa Myers is watching, because Bill Slosky just said that Yahoo should start a search engine.
There you go.
There. Thanks for that, Bill.
Well, instead of ending one, they've ended about 5, haven't they?
They've started them, they've ended them. They're really good at kind of both those things. It's the follow through that's missing. Hey, show us your jersey there. I don't think we've highlighted that yet.
Oh yeah, yeah. If anyone can remember this from the day, Search Engine Commando, that's really taking you back in some history.
There you go. So, anybody has any useful comments on that? Then that would be where is that from? We'll ask the audience. Who knows? We'll probably get the same people answering this time too.
Yeah.
So, Kim, give somebody else a chance to answer if you haven't already hit reply on your comment. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing. But of course, there's been a lot of evolution of what's happened with Google's algorithm along the way. I mean, I think it's fair to say that what happened to Alta Vista is they were unable to deal with the spam attack that they were faced with, and then Google, you know, developed you know, new algorithms, or commercialized, I should really say, new algorithms that hadn't been successfully commercialized before, and became the dominant search engine. So that meant the spammers began to assault Google, and we began a whole new cycle. Okay, I'm going to fire up this.
A relevant question here from Vipin Kumar says, do you guys think that Google could have handled spam better if they had foreseen its emergence?
Oh, they knew it was around. In fact, Google's the first engine to actually start talking with webmasters back. All of the others viewed us as absolute poison. They had no intention of helping us or getting involved with us very much at all. And Google was the very first to have, you know, a dedicated spokesman. Matt Cutts' role wasn't echoed in any other previous search engine. There was nobody.
No, it's Google guy. That was Google guy.
Yeah, Google guy early days. Yeah, Ammon, do you think on a cynical side, do you think that's kind of at Google that the philosophy, at least originally, was, you know, keep your friends close and your enemies closer?
Partly. Partly it was to get rid of, you know, there's a lot of people who spam because they don't know any better. You know, black hat techniques have their place in certain situations, but it's never ideal. The best SEOs have always used long-term strategies because the stuff I'm doing today is still in effect tomorrow, and you get this cumulative effect that you just do not get with black hat. You can get short-term results that, you know, trust me, in the day, it was worth it. You know, you could make more money in a week or a month than, you know, it was going to cost you. But long-term was always the thing for big brands, and you know, trying to get webmasters and SEOs to understand at least that kind of basics. And look, you don't have to do it that way. I know somebody's talking about this as a great tactic. Here's why it's not, and here's when it's not, and, you know, here's a proper way of doing it. I think to a large extent it worked.
Indeed, I think we've kind of gotten to the era now, though, where you know, black hat is getting complicated enough, except in very niche scenarios, where it's not necessarily faster anymore in aggregate, right? And
there's still stuff there. You know, there is still the ability to use mechanization and brute force. It's just on a complete different scale these days, and you don't expect the results to last more than 2 months, 3 months tops. But you can just get the momentum going, so that in a month you can get there, and then in the next month you're pushing the next set of sites up. So, you know, the churn and burn rate has got faster, but yeah, unfortunately it's still possible. It's just not advisable.
Well,
Yeah,
while we're on the subject of Google communicating and how they've, they chose to make that, another kind of radical decision that nobody else was doing, to, join rather than fight them in a sense and communicate with the SEO community and educate. Um, I think we've seen a shift, and I don't think it's a radical shift. I think it was always there to a certain extent, but I've talked about this before, that we're seeing more and more now of what comes out of that, especially Matt Cutts, that seems to be toward the behavior modification side. In the beginning it seemed to be very pure on an educational basis, and now, we can all point, of course, to the now famous, infamous, guest blog post by Matt, the very well publicized and sometimes well-timed attacks on certain high-profile sites like My Blog Guest, that this seems to be like shock and awe sometimes. Drop a bomb and see what we can get. Do you agree with that, Ammon?
Yes, and even more than that, it's only in recent years we have seen Google go from. Somebody pointed this out before. It used to be that spam is our problem. Here's what you should do, right? Leave spam to us. Now it's right. Here's a load of penalties. Spam's your problem now. You need to police your links. Here's, we're just going to slap out the penalties. It's your job to sort it out. And I don't like that, to be honest.
Yeah, it is a big change. I agree with you. There was really over the, I guess you could say, since February of 2011, Panda was sort of the start of a new set of things at that time. So, okay, we're going to fire up your comment here. Yes, Layla, I remember it as well.
I won. We're talking about, actually, for those who might be just hearing this, Layla mentioned iwon.com, which actually gave away prizes and money for using their search engine.
But they all tried that at various times. Even Microsoft's engine had an incentivized search for a while.
True. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. That was far more recent. That was, what was it just called, Cashback? I forget what the Microsoft one was.
Yeah.
They've done a couple of programs over the years.
Yeah, different things where you get like earn points by using the search engine that could add up to discounts and coupons and things like that. Yeah.
Indeed. Makes me think I should implement the bot, the search engine a lot, and then see what I can do with all those points. But and then I have to share Bill Slosky's comment here.
I love this one.
Offer me 2 for the price of 1. So I don't know. I think the world would do fairly well with 2 Dalai Lamas.
The best one was always if you ever did a vanity search and you found you were for sale. I could buy books about me on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
You still see those sometimes in the AdWords results. People that use big brands like Target here in the United States, particularly. You can do in AdWords. You can do kind of wild card keywords. It'll put almost any keyword in. So you can put your own name in, and sometimes you'll get an ad that says, Target has Mark Traphagen for sale. Still happens.
Yeah. Well, the last one I saw doing it and doing it quite badly was eBay.
Yeah.
So it's amusing that they say, Google search doesn't really work for us. AdWords doesn't work. I'm not surprised. I've seen your campaigns. They were terrible.
Absolutely. Hey, just a reminder for everybody, this is the Digital Marketing Answers Show. So fire up questions, and we will make up facts. We will give our best to thoughts on what you're asking and see if we can help. So here's a
from Bill Slosky. He posted this actually before the show. Part of it might be cut off, so I'll read the whole thing. It says, can you talk or discuss a little bit about the evolution of how people have shared SEO industry information since the participants today have been a part of it at many different stages? There's also a lot of mythology and folklore floating about the industry. How best dispel some of that? So 2 questions. Again, how has it evolved that people talk about SEO and search engines? Has that changed? And what do we do about all the folklore, which is a polite way of saying misinformation that's out there?
Yeah, there's plenty of that. That's for sure. It's really tough for all of us sitting here, I'm sure. You see people write these things, and it's like, okay, haven't we killed this thing already? And unfortunately, we live in a world where the publishing opportunities are prevalent. There are many such opportunities to do that kind of thing, and if you want to put some total BS up there, and you're in a situation where the site that's publishing you is calling you an expert, people are going to walk away with that and believe it. I mean, it's a great question, Bill. I know you are as frustrated as the three of us here on the show today about dealing with that. I spend a lot of time educating, and probably at least half, if not 2/3 of my articles are a response to some idiotic thing that someone said somewhere, and I'm just trying to keep pushing the right word out.
Latent semantic idiocy. Yeah, misinformation gets out there because people still want this, magic silver bullet. It's not that good information isn't out there. It's not that there aren't 10,000 great articles on how to select an SEO and not get ripped off. Everybody's written one. But people still want to find that magic, oh, I can buy SEO for $19 a month. No, you can't. It's that simple. No, you can't. There is nothing in the world that's going to stop you having to think about this. There is nothing in the world which is going to enable you to go, oh, SEO, I don't want to know about that. I'll just outsource the lot. Anybody who doesn't want your input, who is going to let you outsource it onto them without any input in marketing at all, is going to rip you off. They're not using any kind of marketing knowledge because they can't make marketing decisions on your behalf. You've got to be fully on board. It's got to come from the core. So, these are things people paint themselves into that corner, and in recent years I stopped worrying about it so much. If I see somebody putting out something that's reasonably believable and is wrong, I will challenge it. If I see something that everybody should know better, do you know what? I'm going to let you buy that, because if you really are that uninformed, it's your choice. You've chosen to do it, and I'm not going to be there to wipe your backside. Sorry.
One of my hobby horses that I ride often is that I don't think I think it's a failing of our modern education system. We haven't taught people how to be skeptical enough, and I'm using skeptical in a positive sense there, not cynical. Some people confuse it with, but I think being skeptical is being healthy. My wife is a scientist. She works in science communication, and it's frustrating to her on a daily basis to see the general media reports on science, which will take something that's a preliminary result that it's not been peer-reviewed yet, not been replicated, but it's useful in science at that stage because that causes other people to test it and go that, and the headlines will run with it. Kale cures cancer. Harvard scientist proves. He hasn't proved anything, and he knows that. He's not trying to scam anybody, and then he catches hell, a few months later when somebody brings out a study that shows that that's not quite the way it works. So it's the same thing, right, for us. People put out, think about the correlation studies that come out every day, the correlation ranking studies that Moz puts out, or search metrics. People don't understand what correlation means, so they run with that. Google +1s will get you ranked high in search because it's the highest ranking, highest.
It even goes beyond that. I mean, Bill and I were involved with some of the early Moz surveys, and the way that these ranking factors are decided is that Rand asks a lot of SEOs that are respected to put in their idea on a 1 to 5 scale, how much of this is important, or maybe even a percentage scale, and then they average it. And frequently you've got 10 people who say one thing, and one person who's like me, a curmudgeon, and has tested it extensively and says the opposite. And guess what? It will come out now as 80% certain that it's this thing.
Right, and
it doesn't make it so. These are people's opinions, and just aggregating them and coming up ends up with nobody's opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like this latest Moz survey, I looked at it, and it still maintains that social media signals are a big ranking factor, and it was like it was actually down from the prior survey, by the way. So it dropped a bit, but that's just the way it is.
And this is the thing of idiocy in our industry. I have actually argued with somebody and pointed out where Matt has said and where the other engine said SMX London. they're not used. Social signals are not part of our ranking algorithms. How clear is that? Oh yeah, but they're lying because Rand says it is. Honestly, Rand, I love you, but that's what I'm hearing from some of these idiots out there.
Yeah, well, and Rand didn't say that either, and I know from conversations with Rand that he well understands the difference between correlation and causation, and we actually had him on the Digital Marketing Excellence show last fall. Actually, he'll be back on with us on July 10th. We're getting him back on the show, but so it just gets misinterpreted, and people just run with it. And then what happens is some people start structuring consulting businesses around those assumptions, and I'm going to be the one who makes a ton of money by helping people improve their SEO through social media activity, and now they kind of paint themselves in a corner, and they have to defend that that's the way it works, no matter what other evidence comes out there. Not that this is the social media and SEO hangout, but I'll just summarize it this way. Social media is a crappy signal for ranking, period, end of sentence. It's a low-quality signal. They can't use it. Bing tested it. I have screenshots that prove this. Over 3 years, they tested it, and they abandoned it. And they had the Facebook data in a live feed, and the Twitter data in a live feed.
The most that Dwayne Forrester of Bing was saying, he said it in his interview, the interview that you did with him fairly recently, Eric, about his 5 priorities for SEO. He did say that they may use it sometimes for discovery or to experiment with something. If something's getting a lot of sudden social activity, he said maybe we'll fly that up the flagpole, move it up the results a little bit, but to see what people actually do with it when that's a search result. That's not really the same thing as a ranking factor.
That's right. So
I think the trending stuff is very important for helping Google to identify what's news and what's not. Mm-hmm. But of course, that's not anybody's one's signal. It's not anything anyone can do. It's not about that. It's about what's actually trending in the media itself. You came up with something there that goes back to Bill's other question, which is, how we've shared information over the years. And of course, it's classic knowledge that, in a strike of irony, the original SEO's discussions all happened in email. An email discussion list was the very first forum that we really used. Then bulletin board servers. There was some IRC chat discussion. And it wasn't until 96, 97 that the very first SEO forums came about, which everyone thinks are old hat now. And then it started to get more towards blogging. And there was a great advantage to blogging. If I share a tip, I can get all the link juice from it. To me, the move from blogging to, it was a very selfish move from what we'd had with the forums, which is where everybody put the knowledge into the ring for the good of all. Suddenly it became, I need to get something back from this. And to a large extent, I don't think SEO has ever quite recovered from that kind of generosity, except through the very private SEO groups that go on Skype, Facebook groups, which are invite only. People don't want to put out the good stuff where just everybody can use it.
Yeah, and then of course social media has entered into the fray here as well, and people view that as a way of building their own audience and visibility. So it's not quite as good in some sense as blogging in terms of bringing the juice back to yourself, but a lot of people use that as a mechanism to help bring it back to yourself. That's certainly part of what we try to do here at Stone Temple.
I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay, I've got a number of questions backed up here, so we want to start taking those?
Yeah, you're going to give me the white hat, black hat, gray hat sequence?
I could. I'm going to go there first.
50 Shades of Grey Hat.
Here, I'll do it since I have it. Does white hat SEO ever become black hat? That's from Christopher Vogelman. And then his next one is, how many shades of gray are there in SEO?
50.
Hang on, one more. And then the third one from Rinaldo Miguel, what's the dividing line that defines gray hat SEO? So I think people want to get white and gray and black with us.
Okay. Here's my definition. A, there are no hats, apart from this one. And all it's good for is, putting something on your head. The idea of hats was, let's face it, it's a bit of an oversimplification, and there was SEO and there was black hat SEO. White hat SEO was invented later. Do not use the term. What white hat SEO was designed for, white hat, isn't that SEO without the black hat? We've got the distinction. We've got SEO and we've got black hat SEO. Why do we need white hat? Because somebody was very, very bad at getting rankings and needed to explain to his clients why he wasn't getting into the top 10 at all. And his thing was, well, I do white hat ethical SEO. So the reason, they're all cheating. And honestly, that's what it was. White hat SEO was always an excuse for failure to provide results. Please don't buy into it. Please don't ever use the term white hat seriously. It's just an excuse, and it's a very, very bad one.
Interesting. Yeah, so as a white hat SEO, oh, sorry, I violated you. Sorry about that.
As an SEO.
Oh, right. As an SEO that does not practice black hat SEO. How about that? I'm allowed to say that, right?
Of course. But you have to know about black hat even then, don't you? Because you need to know where the dividing lines are, which is getting towards Ronaldo's question there.
Yeah. It's an interesting question because it gets over again into what are we doing here? When I first used to describe what SEO was to my wife, who's a highly ethical person, I said a scientist, she was aghast, and she said, like, it just sounded to her like it was totally illegal activity. So to her, Google was this pristine, pure thing out there, and how dare we even attempt to manipulate, Google in any way to change? And that's a hard thing to overcome. Is where, because ultimately, at the end of the day, in search, search marketing, SEO, whatever you want to call it, that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to manipulate Google. Manipulate, unfortunately, is a word that takes on very negative connotations. But we're trying to say, hey, Google, what we've got over here is what you really want. It's the best. And going back to our discussion earlier, where Google said, like, let's join them rather than fight them. Google realizes that SEOs do provide a useful service in that, because we set up things in a way, if we're doing our job right, to make their job easier, to help them to discover what really should matter. So, but where do you go? Again, where's the line where that crosses over into manipulation with nefarious intent? That gets hard to define sometimes.
So let me actually fill in just for a second. Very important message for Google here. Hey, Google, this is what you want right over here. Oh, sorry, I'm just doing my job here. Go ahead, Ammon.
Yeah, that's what we do. We put it up on slides and make it very easy for them to find. Yeah.
Right.
What we're doing is we're all obeying the old win friends and influence people, except we're trying to win rankings and influence people. Mm-hmm. Of course, we're trying to influence how we're being perceived. We're trying to be perceived as a little bit better than we are. The same way as if you go to a job interview, you brush yourself up, you put yourself at your best. That's what we're trying to do with SEO. When people take it really far, when they're actually lying, giving false CVs, that's when you start to get into problematic areas.
So, while we're talking about intent, Kevin Burns asks here, what is the underlying purpose or intent of black hat operators? Are they as short-sighted as Ammon Johns noted, or they just don't care? Or I think there's a third alternative for some of them, but go ahead, Ammon.
Usually it's simply about how much something is worth, Kevin. I started out in areas that were really tricky, like adult industry, pharmaceuticals, gambling, and you played black hat in those areas because those industries had an industrialization kind of approach. They were very much about numbers, data, volume. They would, put up 10,000 domains and want somebody that could SEO all of them. You had to use shortcuts and tricks on that kind of thing, and it was all about numbers. It was all about, look, 1 week of #1 rankings makes us £10 million. So get that 1 week, no matter what. Mm-hmm. If Google's going to penalise us and we're going to lose, oh, look, we've lost the 2,000 that we invested in domains. Oh, 2,000, 10 million. Ooh, It wasn't a hard choice.
Right. I mean, it was basically the model which people chose for scaling SEO. The model A, which we'll call black hat SEO, and is a kind of a churn and burn type of model, and you get scale by doing a number of these different sites, exactly as you laid out. And okay, let's see if we can get Ammon and Matt here. And in white hat SEO, SEO, without doing black hat stuff, the scale came from the long-term viability of the approach. So again, in the old days, right? I mean, you kind of build up slowly, but it is less susceptible to get hit, and you probably have more of all your eggs in a very small number of baskets, very small number of websites, right? And for many companies, a single website. So
yeah, if you're going to build a brand, you can't afford churn and burn. Apple can't rename as Orange tomorrow. That name's gone as well. If you're going to be doing it for the long term, you've got to aim for the long term.
So as somebody suggested a little bit earlier in the comments, I'm going to go with pink hat SEO. It's the new feminist SEO. It's the way to go, guys.
Excellent. So we won't actually get into too much of a conversation about your femininity, though, okay? If that's all right with you. I'm
secure. I'm totally secure.
There you go. I'm glad about that.
Can I throw in another black hat, white hat question here?
Sure.
Just to keep Ammon charged up. The Susi research engine says, couldn't you say, though, Ammon, that white hat is doing things as Google wants you to, and anything else is non-white, with varying shades all the way to extreme manipulation, churn, and burn?
Well, you could, but we started with the word SEO. SEO was around before black hat. The very first time I heard black hat mentioned in SEO was back when Webmaster World was still called Search Engine World, if I remember rightly, and we were talking about MIBH.net, which was a tracking system. You used to find that soon after the spider hit you, this MIBH net hit you, and we eventually worked out it was probably human checkers from the search engines. And of course, MIBH, it was cut down. Oh, it's the Men in Black helicopters or Men in Black hats. And that was the very first time I heard SEOs talking about black hats, and they were the search engine spies looking for spam, checking what their spiders were picking up. So there was SEO, and later there was a black hat SEO. We didn't need white hat SEO. We've got SEO. This is SEO, and if it isn't SEO, it's black hat. If it's the short-term stuff, it's black hat. Why do we need the term white hat?
So without arguing with you, let's say you have black hat SEO over here, and the other activity is SEO. Let me define how I think that works, and it's similar to one of the definitions I saw someone pop out there. Really, three major components, right? It's building something really great and differentiated. Okay. There's promoting that effectively so that lots of people will engage with it without worrying about whether that's in the form of links or social media or direct traffic or whatever. And then there's building using intelligent promotion. Look, marketing isn't illegal, so intelligent promotion, I mean, it could be TV campaigns, it could be outreach campaigns to influencers and major media, whatever. I mean, all those things, by the way, will generate links to your site. And then there is being intelligent about how you structure your site so a search engine can process it effectively. And by anybody's definition, this is just very smart SEO, right? Even if you don't believe in, effective, link building anymore. Well, link building, is kind of dead in a sense, or even semi-manipulative content marketing. Even if you don't want to believe in any of that stuff, you're a raging idiot to not believe in structuring your site in a way that search engines can read and making them semantically rich and making them, whether you use schema or not, helping them understand everything they want to know about your business. That's here, and that's just so not going away anytime in the next decade, in spite of what you might read.
Well, exactly. It's one of the things, that famous Forbes piece about where he said SEO is dead and content marketing is taking it over. And all right, some people made the mistake, and people who know me know I jump on this as much as anybody. If somebody says content marketing, oh, that's SEO. No, it's not. It's much older than that. But the thing is, the minute you put that content up there, you now need SEO. You need it to be indexable. Bill and I remember in the day that the very first step of SEO was about accessibility, and it was amazing how many, even very enlightened designers, just didn't understand how little search engines understood. They expected the search engine to be able to get clues from CSS in 2003. No, wasn't going to happen. They expected it to be able to render a lot of things that no, it doesn't. It only has very, very basic rendering. In fact, most of the time, a search engine isn't like a browser. It got a lot more like one. Google hired a guy who built browsers, and a lot of people, that was when people first thought that Google was going to work on its browser, about 5-6 years before Chrome came along. And I said, no, they've already got a browser. It's called their Spider, but it just doesn't actually browse your site in the normal way. They need to know how one renders so that they can understand how your page forms and what visual clues are in the rendering, because Google doesn't have eyes. And so understanding these kind of aspects, that's not going away. And the more content is put out there, the more need there is to make sure that the site can be crawled, is interesting enough to crawl, has enough signals going to it to draw that spider regularly. I have seen sites with so much great original content, 30,000 pages or more, and they've got a toolbar page rank on their homepage of 3. And they've got enough juice there to get 10,000 pages indexed maybe out of their 30,000. So at least 2/3 of their site doesn't exist for Google.
Yeah, it's amazing. I still have conversations with people where I need to educate them on this, and it's a very interesting thing you can do to actually illustrate some of the mechanics as to why this is the way it is. If you have on your desktop, say, an image of the Taj Mahal, you can go to images.google.com and drag and drop that into the search box, and Google will come back and tell you that it's the Taj Mahal. So this is what makes it so hard for people, because by the same token, we know that optical character recognition technology has been around for a long time. Speech recognition technology has been around for a long time. But you've got to remember the scale of the problem. All right? There are trillions of web pages out on the web. And at the scale at which Google does this stuff, I won't go through my usual detailed rant of every aspect of the scale of the web, but just know that it's a massive problem. They can't actually apply these enormously computationally expensive calculations on every web page on the web. They would just go bankrupt trying to do it. So here's another one from John Rampton. What could a new search engine do to stand out, attract new users with Google in the position that it is, aka being tried to buy customers, John? That's a great question. Ammon, what do you think?
Well, we've got a lot of contextualization, but we still know Google's not quite there yet. So it could be that it's more semantically relevant. A search engine where it will understand more than just your G+ profile. It will look at other profiles to understand more about you and serve ads that suit your personality when it doesn't have other clues that are contextually relevant to you. That might be one of the ways. I think something that also ties in better with your life. Google mobile search is interesting, and the idea of putting it into Google Glass is good. But I think Siri showed us that there was potential for people to switch to a rival if Siri had just been better. So yeah, a wearable piece of technology that you've got with you could have a built-in search engine that would push Google out if it was usable, if it was good enough. And Siri just wasn't quite there.
There's been increasing talk also that the real threat to Google in the future might not be another big search engine being better than Google, but it might be the fragmentation of search, that people stop going to one source for search, but they search within closed networks, within smaller niches, very dedicated spaces that are more specific to their search. Let's talk about Amazon. People, how many commercial searches now happen right on Amazon and Google never sees them?
Yes, absolutely.
That kind of thing could be the real threat rather than another Google being born.
Absolutely. and there are certain markets that will always end up being black hat here too. I think it's just because of the nature of those businesses. I just saw something go by in the stream from Eric. I'm sorry, Basish.
Yeah.
That's just sort of the nature of those environments.
Yeah, Scott Scowcroft says that he has a friend who says he does black hat and it works. Is he just blowing steam, or does it work? Well, I think Ammon answered that earlier. It does still work, but increasingly in the short term, that you get shorter and shorter results. You have to churn and burn faster than you used to. But yeah, you can still get short gains out there, and people will always. It's an arms race, right? People will always try something because the money to be made is so significant. If you happen to hit on something, as you said earlier, that even for a month or two. Now, by saying that, I'm not advocating it at all. We're all about, we wouldn't work with a client like that. We want to be working with brands who have a long-term brand strategy that we're going to be partnering with for years to come. But
Kim brought up a really good point on that earlier, and she said that in the early days it was some of the big brands that were doing the worst black hat, and it really was because they didn't want an SEO telling them how to rewrite their page. And they didn't want to put things invisibly into their page and change the way it was written. So they only left us the invisible stuff. And that often meant that they were the sites that had cloaking going on, that had these funny redirects going on, which is why BMW was one of the first sites hit for, really heavily doing this.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, the failure to accept that SEO needs to be done and we have to change your site to do it was one of the things that drove industrial scale black hat for a long time, and it still goes on in some of those industries today.
So here's a question. Oh, sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
That's the one I was going to put up. Go with it.
Okay, so question from Christopher Vogelman. So do you recommend optimizing a site for search engines other than Google?
Yeah. And one of them to think of straight away actually is Google, but people forget it. YouTube. There are more searches done per day on YouTube than any other search engine, almost. Amazon's close and eBay's close. Now, again, if you're a small business, think of something you could offer on eBay and also have a link to your site, and that could be driving traffic to your site to another huge search engine that isn't Google and isn't Bing. eBay, Amazon certainly allows you to sell direct. Yahoo's got its stores. I don't recommend them because the platform they're on isn't easy. But there's plenty of ways of tapping traffic that ultimately it's something Dave Harry's always saying. Anywhere there is a search box, there is SEO.
Yeah, no, totally true. And I think it's if you get into a conversation though about Google, should I optimize for Bing? And it's a tricky question because first of all, I'm a fan of Bing gaining market share just because it would be really good for the industry. I love Google. Little known fact that I'll share is that I have about a dozen Google shirts, and it's basically one of those is my night shirt pretty much every single night because I've made my living and paid for my kids' college education with Google. So
as Eric cuddles a stuffed penguin and panda in each arm.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't do that.
Eric Engie, in bed with Google.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Not exactly the presentation I was looking for, Em. So let's work on that one a little bit, okay? But the reality is that it would be good for the industry if Bing were stronger in terms of its market share. It really isn't. I mean, through their deal with Yahoo, if you look at their cumulative search volume between Yahoo and their own Bing platform, it really does make them the #2 search engine. Although YouTube is bigger than either one of those individually.
Yeah, we won't do the #2 jokes about Bing.
Yeah, there you go. That'd be great. But one thing I wouldn't do is go chase some practices to optimize for Bing, which is at the expense of your Google efforts. So if there's things that you can learn and tweak and do differently that will enhance your experience with and your traffic from Bing, that are also good for Google, then that's probably worth doing. There isn't a lot of science out there to help you, though, in terms of articles that have been written about how to do that kind of optimization.
And of course, with our international audience, don't forget Yandex, don't forget Baidu, don't forget, you know, a whole host of Asian search engines that are actually, you know, as big as Google, or at least are the #2 player over there ahead of others. So.
Yeah, you've got Seznam in Czechoslovakia and Naver in South Korea, and then on the video side of things, we actually have as a client the #1 video search engine in Turkey, of all things. Oh yeah, thank you, Gina, and Ammon, thanks for highlighting it. Again, wasn't exactly the presentation I was looking for.
Not the T-shirt people were looking for people to take away from it.
Yeah, yeah. So,
I'm excited about SEO. Google sends me to sleep every night.
Yeah. So, well, hey, looks like we're already kind of at the end of the show here. So hey, Ammon, this has been fantastic. It's one of those conversations where it's like I looked up and it was 2:01 already. So
we could keep going forever on a topic like this.
Yeah, we sure could. So let's just take one more question, because I think we have a good one here from. We kind of touched base on this, but here's does a site like Pinterest ever help one's SEO? Oh, and I hope the search engine was not. Oh, wait a minute. Hey.
Sorry. This one I quickly want to address. This is absolutely a joke, Christine. This is really old school, spammy stuff. Do not use search engine commando today. Okay.
I had a chance to say that. Yeah.
It's an idea of how far the industry has come. Okay. I'm not recommending this anymore.
Oh, well, I could let me start making some slides. Ammon John sleeps with. Oh, never mind.
He sleeps commando.
Yes.
I'm saying nothing.
Probably the best course of action. Yes.
All right. So Pinterest. Does Pinterest help SEO?
Anything can help SEO. It's just how directly or indirectly. Anything that gets people to your site may get people talking about your site, excited about your site, and therefore linking to your site and giving activity that the search engines will determine is useful. Does it mean that Pinterest itself is? Does it matter? If it's working for people, the search engines will pick it up. So
excellent.
What we keep saying about, you know, do it for people, that really is the truth. That you start SEO by working out, if I send 10 people to this who are all good prospects, will one of them convert? And if it isn't, don't start anything else. Don't start sending thousands of people to a bad experience.
Yeah, there's an awesome thing there that I want to just call out. It's like, okay, if doing something on any platform, call it a social media platform, call it, I don't know, a parasailing stunt, or whatever it is, results in more traffic to your site, which causes things to happen somewhere that lead to improved search engine rankings and increased search engine traffic. Whether the signal is direct or indirect does not matter. You still do it. And you don't need to worry about whether the signal is direct or not. We do get a little bit obsessed with all of that. But anyway, we really are very much at the end of the show, a little past the end of the show, and we already have people asking for an encore, by the way. Ronaldo, appreciate that, and maybe we'll arrange that sometime in the next coming weeks. If Ammon will have us, because maybe we've pissed him off enough that he's never coming back.
No, I'm always happy to chat about the history of SEO. There's so much to it, and B, you know, it really does play so much of a part into the future of SEO. We need to understand where we've been to see where we're going.
Totally. So, any other closing remarks, Ammon, or do you want to leave it with that?
Goodbye.
Very good. Mark, closing comments?
Just fascinating discussion. You know, I learned every time I'm with Ammon. I learn new things. I really do. I seriously mean that. I really do appreciate it. Always a great discussion, and I second Ronaldo there that we should do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, thank you everybody for watching. You know, from my perspective, just to go back to what we said at the beginning, understanding how this thing has evolved and grown and transitioned over time. Really, it's a story of a maturation of an entire industry, and the sophistication of what's needed today is at a whole nother level. I agree with Ammon also that the people who were good at it before and evolved with it, they live it, eat it, breathe it, sleep it, and I would put good money on them because they're really safe bet to continue succeeding. And if you want to succeed, then I think understanding that history and embracing it and kind of understanding that trajectory is an incredibly valuable thing to do. But again, thanks everybody for watching. Really appreciate it. Thursday on the Digital Marketing Excellence Show, we have the return of AJ Cohn coming back. So I'm very excited about that. Hope to see you all then, and thanks for watching us here today.
Have you got a better cowbell this time?
No, we got to work on the cowbell.
All right, all right. Now it's only fair. We did you guys. It's only fair I get dumped on too.
There you go. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.